Hi, lovelies. Today I'm going to be chatting about my Saturn return and things that I have noticed that have been coming up with me since this transit has been happening. For those who are not too familiar with what a Saturn return is or what a return is in general, I am referring to astrology. And so we are, for those who study astrology, we are born um, under the stars with a certain planetary placements based on our time and place of birth. And when you sometimes those points in your chart or those points in the celestial mapping of when you were born get reactivated by transits. And what happens during a return is that that particular planet comes back to the exact point that it was when you were born. And different planets move at different speeds. And so, for example, your solar return, which we celebrate as your birthday, the same day that you were born, every year. You know, that's a yearly return, a solar return. The moon, as we know, moves a little bit more quickly. So once a month, the moon placement is going to go back to where it was at the time of birth. For the outer planets, so Jupiter, Saturn, and then so the more traditional planets. And then when we look at the more recent planets, for non-traditional planets like Pluto, Uranus, Neptune, they have returns that are like over a few years. So Jupiter, it's every 12 years, I believe, and Saturn is about every 30 years. So your Saturn return, the archetype of Saturn is discipline, it's structure, it's time. These are the big themes with Saturn, and it's believed that once you get that first hit, like that, every hit of Saturn is significant, but when that first Saturn return marks kind of the beginning of adulthood. It's kind of that crossing over of maturation where you go from like child to adult, and there's significant themes within that maturation based on where that sign is in Saturn and where it is placed in terms of houses in your chart. So I am feeling it, guys. I was like, what is going to happen? Because you hear so many stories, like people like, I lost my house, my relationship ended. It's pretty much Saturn is the course corrector. It's the drill sergeant. It's really that father time energy. It's known in astrology as has that reputation of being a bit of a tougher energy. And so there is sometimes a little bit of dread and, dare I say it, even fear when we start talking about Saturn returns. So I knew it was coming up for me, and different astrologers have different takes on it. Some astrologers that I have had the pleasure of watching their content and following them, they believe that you're actually going to feel your Saturn return the moment that Saturn changes signs. So in my case, my Saturn in my natal chart is in Pisces, and the Saturn Pisces transit started back in March 2023. So that's when, for some astrologer, my Saturn return would have started. And then you would feel it more prominently once that exact degree hits. So the exact degree of where Saturn is in your chart, when it returns to that exact degree, then you would probably feel like more hits. And for me, that first hit happened this spring, so spring 2024. And now Saturn is currently retrograding, so I'm getting kind of like, it's like a repassing through. So it's going to hit by degree 3 times. So direct in retrograde motion and then direct again. And it's also going to be in Pisces until 2026, February or 2026. So I have this entire time period to really see things unfold. And I'm not an astrologer, but most of the astrologers that I have been following, they really speak to the fact that you're really going to be able to speak to what exactly is going on once the transit has passed. Like once you're in it, you might not exactly be able to say like, okay, this is what's going on, but come February of 2026, once Saturn moves into Aries, then I'll probably have a better picture of what exactly Saturn was trying to do. The reason why this transit I feel has been pretty significant for me is because my sixth and seventh house, like Saturn is my sixth and seventh house ruler. So I feel like I've been in a Saturn transit for like ever, because Saturn was in Capricorn, Saturn went into Aquarius, and now, the ruler of my seventh house, am I getting my Saturn return, and it's in Pisces. So I feel like I've had like year after year of consecutive like intense Saturn energy, and that whole I have personal planets in Capricorn, so I'm a Leo rising. So it's been intense years. Pluto just made its entry into Pluto, and I'm an early degree Leo rising and an early degree Scorpio sun. So I'm feeling it. I'm like, I can't quite pinpoint that. Like, is it the Saturn? Is it the Pluto? Like, what's everything going on? But I feel like it's a bit of a combination of everything. Jupiter has recently moved into Gemini, and it's squaring Saturn. So I natally have a Jupiter Saturn square. So it's not an energy that is like foreign to me. I do have that energy natally. However, my Jupiter in my chart is in Sagittarius, where it's at its domicile, its home there. Um, Jupiter naturally rules the sign of Pisces and Sagittarius, so it's it's been interesting. And so from the aspect of like Saturn, I kind of touched on it and what the Saturn return is. As far as what it actually means for Saturn to be in Pisces, what's Pisces? It's the 12th sign of the zodiac. It's a water sign. It's ruled by the two fish, and it connects kind of that subconscious and conscious mind. It's the it speaks of the realm of spirituality and the unknown and what we can't see. And it's really that connection between reality, what we can form, and kind of beyond. And I don't know if you have Pisces in your life, but they definitely have a bit of a go with the flow energy. I've always had such amazing encounters with people with Pisces energy. There's a very lovely healing energy. It is on the axis of Virgo and Pisces. And so I feel like when planets signs are on the same axis, they share energy. Like they're two sides of a coin pretty much. So they speak to each other. So I know traditionally Virgo is like rules health. I see like that aspect as well. For a more metaphysical, spiritual aspect of health, you kind of see that with Pisces. So, tying those themes in to kind of Saturn and structure and discipline and time, and then putting that into my house. I'm a Leo rising, so it comes into my eighth house in whole signs and ninth house in Placidus. So depending on which kind of school of thought you're in. Um I'm kind of looking at it from a whole sign perspective, and I see aspects of the ninth house as well, but I have definitely seen the eighth house aspects of it. And eighth house rules shared resources, it rules intimacy, it also a house that speaks of traumas and kind of dealing with those different traumas. So if the 12th house is kind of unconscious territory, then the 8th house is kind of more conscious trauma. Um, and so I have definitely felt the call, if that's a right way to say it, the call to move into a space of maturity when it comes to establishing boundaries and understanding myself better as far as eighth house themes and topics. When it comes to dealing with trauma, I've had definitely over the years, I've gone to therapy. I have um, really done like the self work, which I think is ongoing. I don't think you ever stop working on yourself. Um, but I was able to name and frame kind of what certain things have been going on for me, either things that had stemmed from childhood, certain patterns, and was able to do the work to kind of question certain thought patterns and see how I wanted to move. I definitely grew up in a space that was very emotionally reactive, and I definitely was very emotionally reactive, I feel. Um, I didn't know how to process my emotions. I didn't know how to express my emotions. And I really felt almost like a slave to what I felt at any given moment in time. And that really changed when I started doing the self work that needed to be done, and also being mindful of my boundaries and being mindful of what energies I was around, people that I was around, the situation I was around, and just understanding myself in terms of how do I cope? How do I, like, what is it that I need? And astrology has always been such a special tool for me in terms of understanding myself from an energetic perspective. And I felt like from the research that I've done on my chart and the readings that I've had have always been so insightful in allowing me to really see kind of the root of certain patterns and also just basically what it is that I need. I always have a bit of difficulty kind of vocalizing and even just understanding for myself what my deeper needs and values were, and which is so important. It's really hard to move from a space of authenticity when you yourself, you don't even know what that actually looks like for yourself. And so doing that deeper dive in my own psyche, if you will, gave me the opportunity and the room to do that exploration. And I think it was a recent situation that happened not too long ago that really made me realize how much um, how much of a shift had happened. Um, so yeah, so I had. I'm just gonna jump into story time. So pretty much, I had plans with someone, and we were supposed to meet up to do a project. Um, and I was limited in the time that I had. Saturn. I was limited in the time that I had, and because I work full time and this project I was hoping to do within my off hours, and I only have like 2 days off. So I was hoping to be able to get this done within the time frame, knowing that I had like a very busy week ahead. And so I had initially sent an email, sent like dates, like this is my availability for the next month, what works for you. The person didn't initially answer the email, so I send them another separate message, and then they're like, yeah, let's book something for next week. I'm like, okay, cool. Sent an invite for that week, and a day before we were supposed to meet up, person cancels. So again, I have to like pivot, and I had to pivot, and they're like, let's do it over the weekend. So I changed the date to over the weekend, and so it was a very busy weekend. I had a wedding the day before, out of town, so drove there, drove back, got back home at like 2 o'clock in the morning, got about, I think, like 3 hours of sleep, got back up, or like had rented out a studio space to be able to complete this project with this person. And literally, as I'm pulling into the parking lot, I check my phone. I had been driving. It was like a 30-minute commute. So there was also like highway construction. So all these things happening, um, that are kind of like not in my control, or things that, I hadn't foreseen, Pisces. And I look at my phone, look at the text, and it pretty much says that the the person is telling me like they're not going to be able to make it. They can't make the appointment. They are tired, and it doesn't work for them. To be fair, or just to provide context, this is about less than 2 hours before we're actually supposed to um, connect and meet and do the project. So I took a deep breath. I took a deep breath because I was like, what? What? I could feel the emotions like swarming, and like just the floodgates of all the emotions flooding forward. And in that moment, I was just like, I don't actually have time to panic because, yeah, I already rented out the space. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to make the most out of the situation, and whatever I can, um, prepare or shoot, I will. I didn't end up like being able to utilize that time in the way that I had wanted to, but essentially at the end of the day, it served as a great lesson for me because I was like, I ended up, um, the goal was to be able to create some additional content, and that setback kind of took into my free time that like I had already allotted this time for content creation, and I had said that I was going to do this project, and then that project following through kind of ate into my allotted time for that, because then I had to go back to like my full-time job, and I didn't have time to shoot anymore. And so I had about like 2 days of like lost content footage, and that meant being behind on content creation in general. And so that was a lesson for me to be like, you should always have a plan B. Like, don't book with someone. No offense, but don't book with someone unless you have like a solid bank, Saturn, until you have like a solid bank of content, until you have, a backup plan, because if I had that, even if that would have fallen through, I would have been able to go back in my bank and have things that I could post and put together. And so that was just like a lesson for me. And it helped me frame kind of how I wanted to move forward, as if I wanted to be consistent with what it is that I was wanting to do. Like, I don't have control over other people. I don't have control over unforeseen situations. The only thing that I have control over at the end of the day, to a certain extent, is myself. And so I like, what do I need to do if I want to collaborate with people, if I want to do certain joint projects with people, in order to make sure that I can still deliver on my end, on my goals, on my um, deadlines. And so that was just kind of like a note and something that I was able to take away from that situation. I did, after kind of some deep breaths, responded to the person, just letting them know, like, thank you for letting me know. I didn't really kind of elaborate at that point. And then I needed to go inside that space of reflection, because I was upset, and I've always found it super difficult to like deal with my emotions, at least the negative ones, or the ones that I perceive or society has put the label on that they're negative. I'm like, I don't want to be mad at this person. I don't want to have any hard feelings. With that said, my emotions are valid. I want to be in a space that I can validate my emotions, and I want to be in a space where I can make the most out of the situation in terms of lessons, in terms of like insight. And at that point, like, I had tried to schedule with this person and be very professional in the way that I approach this person on separate occasions. And with their actions at the time showed me that they were not reliable. And I had to take that information. In the past, I have not been good at taking information of that nature. I have made excuses for people. I have, you know, either completely dismissed the signs or I've gotten really, really upset and triggered. And um, one thing about that situation that really, for me, kind of flashed in my mind that I think this is going to be a theme for your Saturn return was just, I realized in that moment, and not to say that like it's the first ever moment that with that has happened, but it was the first moment where I kind of was able to sit back and say, I think there has been a completely significant shift in the way that I react to things now as opposed to how I would have reacted to things in the past. I kept things professional. I kept things short and sweet. So while still keeping my boundaries, like before I would have probably said like, probably texted back, either raged, because I definitely went through that phase of life where I was just raging anytime I was upset, or I would have just been like, no, everything's fine. And I didn't do that. I just said, thank you for letting me know. So I didn't think it was fine. I don't think it was okay for less than 2 hours before we're supposed to meet for you to cancel on plans that you've already rescheduled. Like time is precious. And I gave this person of my time on two separate occasions and they didn't have the courtesy to show up and to provide like an adequate reason and time like that. It was an investment for me in terms of my time, and it was an investment for me in terms of renting out an office space. There was a lot of things that went into being able to show up in that moment. And with less than 2 hours notice, this person just was like, I'm too tired to show up. So that told me a lot about that person in that moment. And it's not to bash or discredit that person. It's nothing against that person. And that's one of the things that I'm realizing with myself, that coming to these conclusions and these realizations as far as other people and dealings. Again, it's my eighth house in terms of trusting people, in terms of who to um, who to bond with, who to trust, who to share resources with, who to um, build certain like intimacy with, like that. Those are the themes that are coming up for me in that time, and it's nothing against any specific individual because everyone has free will. Everyone has free will, and everyone's allowed to show up for themselves how they want to. And I have zero judgment as far as that person or any other person, how they choose to show up. I just am at a stage in my life where I have to make decisions based on what people are doing and showing up. And before I used to take how people acted towards me as a reflection of my worth, as a reflection of, you know, how worthy and important I am. And that's just inaccurate. And so I had to move from a space of knowing my worth, knowing my needs, knowing what I value, and allowing people to show up, giving people room to show up and allowing them to do so in a way that suits them. And however that person chooses to show up, first of all, it's not a necessarily has to be a mark on their character. It doesn't necessarily have to represent them as a whole person. It can just be a representation of how they're showing up in that moment. And we all have the opportunity to change. We all have the opportunity to evolve. So I 1000% give people that room and that space to do that. And it's important for me to create that invitation for the people that I invite in my life. With that said, it's okay. And growing into that knowing and that understanding, it's okay to see how someone moves and say, this is not aligned with me. This is not aligned with my values. This is not aligned with where I want to go in life. This is not aligned with how I want to work. In the context of, for example, a work situation, if I have a certain work ethic and I'm seeing someone display certain attributes that can show that they have a completely different work ethic, it's okay to say, we have different work ethics. It's not like, oh, you're a terrible person, I hate you. Like, it's not that deep. But I get to say, I'm probably not going to want to work with you based on what you're showing me is your work ethic and how you choose to show up. And I'm feeling more comfortable just moving from that space and more leveled and more at peace moving from that space. Like, I think I used to feel a lot of guilt and a lot of shame when I would get upset or angry because I'm like, am I a bad person? Like, why do I feel so strongly? And again, like Pisces, right? Like that Pisces energy always wants to like get along and see the good in everyone and everything. And so I definitely feel that energy. But with that Saturn there, I also have to be able to see my worth and I also have to see the good in me. I have to be able to see it as much in the other person as for me. And I also have to be able to see it in the context of like the structure and in terms of like with Saturn. Am I going to keep giving someone chances to disrespect me? That's just not respectful to me. On their end, if I had done that to them and they would have said like, I would have understood because I'm like that. It's a shitty way to show up for someone, for like, what I mean? So I had always been so hard on myself and yet never held other people as accountable as I held myself, having super high standards for myself and just being so hard on myself while giving other people room and space to get away with everything outside of murder in my life. And I had to explore within myself why I was okay with that. Where did that stem from? Where did that allowance stem from? And how did I want to move going forward? And that situation, when it happened and I saw how I dealt with it, I was proud of myself because I respected myself, I respected my boundaries, and I took from the situation what I needed to take from it, which is my lessons, my game plan. Like, okay, this is how we're going to move going forward. And I left the situation without necessarily having hard feelings for that person, but understanding from our interactions the information that I need to take in as far as how my dealings should be with that person and how much I should trust or rely on that person based on how they were showing me that they could be reliable or not reliable, if that makes sense. And that was a piece that I have always struggled to integrate in my life. And I am seeing how with these transits, how it's really pushing me forward in doing that and having more of a screener, if that makes sense, when it comes to my dealings with people and my interactions with people and who do I trust and who do I let in. And I have I have too often just not had appropriate boundaries when it comes to people. And that is something that needs to change. That is something that it absolutely needs to change. I need to shift that. People need to earn my trust. People need to earn my trust. People need to be able to show up in a consistent manner, in a manner that is respectable. And as much as I want those things out of people, I also have to hold myself accountable of how I'm showing up as well. And that was a huge thing for me. I remember being, in a relationship dynamic or a dating scenario where I had gotten really mad at that person. And they did reflect back to me how, you're scary when you're mad. And that had always stuck with me and has still stuck with me to this day because I grew up being scared when the adults around me were upset because of just how their anger was ill ill managed. And growing up with volatility, you're very sensitive to that. And I think that's part of the reasons why it was so difficult for me to get to a space where I felt like I could really, really manage my emotions because I was afraid of them. I was afraid to snap. I was afraid to lose control because I felt like, you have to keep everything under a lid. But that only contributed to me being more volatile because I would keep things in, and then it would just explode. And I had to learn that it's okay to feel. That is information. You don't have to act on everything you feel, but it's okay to feel. And it's okay to explore why you feel the way that you feel. And so that is something that I had to shift. And instead of feeling shame and guilt and anger towards myself because I was feeling big emotions, I needed to explore those big emotions and not necessarily react, but assess and act from a space of the kind of human that I wanted to be. And so taking the anger to see like, okay, this situation made me upset because in this scenario, I feel like I was disrespected. And how do I want to move forward with that? Is this somebody that I still want to connect with and deal with, or is it not? And it's okay to make that decision. Not okay to like yell at that person or cuss them out or anything like that, but it's okay to either have a conversation with someone if that's appropriate, or just kind of keep my distance as appropriate as it is. And that's something that I'm finding over time. But it's through those relationship dynamics, it's through those scenarios that I was able to come to some of those conclusions of how was I showing up and and I it definitely felt like that those extremes of either extremely suppressing or imploding or exploding in a way that wasn't a reflection of how I wanted to show up. And I had to make those corrections for myself. And I'm glad I did. I feel like I'm a much calmer person for it. I'm much more at peace for it. And I get to show up in my relationships in the way that I want to show up in my relationships because at the end of the day, I'm in control of me. And then people get to show up in the relationship how they choose to show up. And that's okay because they're responsible for them. And that was a huge thing, responsibility. Um, Feeling like my actions dictated another person's actions. I have to act like this if I want them to act like that. At the end of the day, that's just a form of manipulation. And sometimes you're not even aware. Sometimes you're not even aware of that. And manipulation can seem like such like dirty, ugly word. And I don't think people necessarily are always malicious in the way that they approach that and approach certain situations. But again, it was probably just coming from an innocent place of trying to get my needs met early on and thinking like, if I'm the good girl, if I'm dutiful, if I'm service oriented, if I do all my homework, I do all my chores, I do everything that I'm supposed to do, then they'll show up the way that they need to show up. They'll like me the way that they need to like me. And that's just false. That's just false. And I've been in multiple relationship scenarios, whether that be friendships, whether that be dating, romantic situations, where I have had to learn that the hard way, that The only thing at the end of the day that I'm responsible for is showing up as authentically, as honestly, as genuinely and sincerely as I can, meeting myself and other people with kindness and compassion, which is, those are like the lovely, beautiful components of Pisces energy. And then letting people show up as they want to. And then I get to make that decision as far as like, do I want to keep connecting with that person or not? Completely having zero boundaries, completely like self-sacrificing myself and becoming the martyr in my own relationships for love, for intimacy. That is just not what is going to cut it. That's not true attachment. It comes from a place of fear. It comes from a place of insecurity. And anytime you connect with people from that space, there are significant consequences, not only to the relationship dynamic itself, but to yourself, because you are denying yourself. Um, and that's how it felt. Like it felt like, and it always felt off. It always felt off because I never felt genuine in my interactions. It felt off because at the end of the day, those people were not right for me, which is why I even felt like I needed to go out of my way to do all those things anyway. So I was literally abusing of myself and re-traumatizing myself in so many ways without realizing it. And I needed to go through that. Like, I think another component of Saturn, whether you believe in that or not, I do to a certain extent. I think it was it's my karma in this lifetime to come back and, or to come in and learn these important lessons. I look at my chart, I look at certain energies in my chart, and it does speak to, you know, difficulty trusting people and like needing people that I can count on, that are trustworthy, that are honest, that are loyal, that are consistent. You know, I have my Venus in Scorpio conjunct Pluto. I have my moon in Capricorn in my sixth house. So people that are reliable, people that are consistent, people that are good to me, that I can count on, that are loyal, like that's what I need in this lifetime. And I've been so fortunate and grateful to have met individuals like that. And the people in my life today, I do not lose any sleep. Like I don't lose any sleep thinking like, oh, like why did I say this? Or should I said that? Or like, what did they think of me? Like they give me so much love, so much peace, so much security. And I genuinely feel like that's my indicator. And it's so beautiful because I did end up having like a really beautiful um, relationship reading with an astrologer. And that's what something that she had said, looking at my chart and looking at my Venus and moon placement. She's like, you're going to meet people and you'll know that they're your people just by like how effortless it is. And it's true that every single friendship, every single person in my life that I have encountered that has been just like such a breath of fresh air and has been a genuine, authentic relationship. It has always been effortless. I have always been given permission to show up and be myself. They have always made space for me. And in turn, I have had the beautiful ability to also do the same for them. And they see me. They see me in a way that is so genuine and so authentic. And I have always like fought, I felt like I had to fight, felt like I had to like prove myself to people so that I can earn love, so I can earn um, acceptance, and to like meet these people that just by showing up and being myself just see me. Like hearing that in that reading was just such great reassurance and confirmation for me that I was on the right track. Like when I met those people, when I had those interactions, that was confirmation that I was on the right track. And the people that like planted those seeds of doubt and planted those seeds of like insecurity and like were inconsistent and like unreliable and untrustworthy, like that was indicators that of things from my past, of past traumas, of things that I was still carrying that I had to like look at and be like, you have to make a choice to decide not, you don't want to deal with that anymore and kind of just move forward. And it's again, nothing against that person. It's, it just, when you were a child, you think as a child, you move as a child. And once you become an adult, you have to put away childish things. 1 Corinthians, a little paraphrasing of 1 Corinthians 13:11, but that was a big thing for me. Like, just, I always was moving through life trying to, like, make people that I shouldn't have, like, you know what I mean? Like, forcing people's hand. Like, I remember, like, in certain dating scenarios, like, sticking around past the, like, dude, like, it's done. Like, it's done. They are showing you in every single way that they can show you that they are not the person for you. Why are you still sticking around? Why are you still holding on to this? And that was my own stuff that was playing out, that I had to get to a space, that I've been able to come to this space through self-awareness, through doing that inner work, through therapy, to really like identify and be like, there are certain thought patterns, there are certain subconscious patterns that are playing out that I need to correct and say, no, I'm not going to keep playing out that script. I want something different for myself. And now I get to have richer relationships. I get to have people in my life that I genuinely trust, that I genuinely love, and that genuinely love and trust me. And that is been part of my soul's journey to identify what my values are, to identify what my needs are, to identify what my wounding is, to be able to move from a space of healing, understanding, discernment when I'm dealing with myself and when I'm dealing with other people. And I am very excited to see how this Saturn return continues to unfold. I am, like I said, I've had my first direct hit by degree, and then it's now, Saturn's now retrograde, so it's like re-hitting it. So like that scenario that I talked to you about, that was like during like that retrogradation. I don't know how to say it, but when that planet went retrograde, it hit 5 degree again, and then it's gonna go direct and hit it again. So I'll see kind of what unfolds, and of course, wait till that entire transit has passed through Pisces to really get a really good picture of what it is. But that that really provided me a good space of reflection. I feel, to be able to say like, yeah, there's been, the work that I've been doing hasn't been in vain, and I feel really supported by God. I feel very supported by the universe, and like my chart is not out to get me. I think like before I used to like see my chart, and I used to read certain. That's why I'm like, I probably suggest going to like a good astrologer that understands, has a better understanding of certain patterns, because sometimes they'll just hear snippets of different aspects or different uh, archetypes of signs, and it can be really hard on yourself. Like I remember being really hard on myself because I have Scorpio placements and Capricorn placements, and I don't know why those signs get a bad rep. They get a bad rep, so I was just like, my June, Saturn in my 8th house, um, retrograde. So I was just like, kind of walked around thinking that I was kind of like doomed. And after that reading, I left there feeling like I had even more faith and even more trust in God, because I feel like God really created me with a purpose and really created me intentionally with good things in mind. And the reason why things are set up in my chart for that way is in a way to protect me and for me to learn the lessons that I need to learn so that I can prosper and grow into being the best version of myself and attract the right people my way. And if it wasn't for those energies and some of these encounters, then I wouldn't be where I am today. And so I do have a huge, huge, huge sense of gratitude for my journey and for who I am. And I didn't always come from that space, but I'm grateful that my Saturn return so far has brought this mature outlook and this love and compassionate understanding for myself and establishing boundaries in my life so I'm able to enjoy myself in a genuine, authentic way and others as well. It takes such a toll on you when you feel depleted, when you're around the wrong set of people. And again, not I don't say wrong set of people as in these people are terrible people and they have terrible character. Not everyone is for you. And some people you meet and you click and they just get you. And then other people, like, it's like you're speaking a different language to them, even if you're speaking the same language. It can feel like you have kilometers, miles, so much distance between you when you're sitting right next to each other because that person just doesn't get you. And I feel like I overly focused on those people. I overly focused on trying to make those people my people. How to make, like, if there were 10 people in a room and half of those people liked me without effort, I would focus on the 5 people that seemed to have an issue with me because it would be like, why don't you like me? It must mean that something's wrong with me. Like, all 10 need to like me. And like, all 10 don't. All 10 don't. Like, if it's just one person in that entire room just really, really gets you, that's more than enough. That's more than enough. You're not going to be everyone's cup of tea. I've had to learn that. And I've had to accept that, okay, it's okay to say, I have love for you, I have respect for you, and the most respectful, loving thing that I can do for you is to stay in my lane and respect you being in yours, right? Like sometimes that's the most loving, respectful thing that you can do for someone is for them to do their thing and for you to do theirs. We're not all meant to have like these deep connections with everyone. And that is something that I've had to learn with these transits in my 8th house is who's going to be those people? What are the archetypes of those people? What are going to be people that I can rely on and trust and really work and do life with? And I'm grateful that I'm in this space where I can genuinely see it, where I can genuinely start to visualize that, but more importantly, where I can be that person in my life for myself and for others. And that allows me to also be in a space to like attract like-minded people who have similar values, who have similar mindset as well. And it's just a lighter way to move through life. I feel like up until this point, like certain situations and dynamics with people felt very heavy. And so have a lot to learn from because those planets that I'm talking about, like my Saturns and Pisces, like I have to learn from the Gemini counterpart. Right now there's some planets that have shifted into Gemini, including Jupiter, that's squaring that Saturn. But I think there's something to learn about that. I have some Gemini friends, and sometimes it seems like nothing bothers them. I know things do. Like, again, that's a bit of like a false archetype that like they don't have emotion. Air signs don't have emotions. They do. Check in on your air sign friends. They have emotions. But I've definitely seen them be able to pivot and be able to, let a conversation be a conversation and let people show up and move like the way they need to move and not be tied in locked in. I have with my water energy, my Scorpio energy, I have a lot of fixed sign energy. So always wanting to like lock everything in and hold on. I have getting to that space where I can move with a certain level of fluidity, move with the intention of just being my best self and letting certain things go. Like I need to, that's needed to be a lesson. And I look back at certain situations that, if I had that sort of like insight, that I probably wouldn't have stuck in those situations as long as I did. But at the same time, you know, that was where my mindset was at the time, and it did allow me to learn the lessons that I've learned up to this day. So it's not in vain, it's not wasted, but I definitely, with this current outlook, I'm able to have a different appreciation and understanding of the past and have more foresight into how I want to move going into the future. So I'm excited for myself, this next chapter of adulthood. It's more grounded, more mature, um, better boundaries. I'm excited for me, and I'm excited for the work. I'm proud of the work that I put into myself to be able to move in that space. And like I've mentioned, I feel very supported by the energies around me, by my ancestors, angels, guides, God, by my relationships in my life currently to be in this space. Yeah. Um, I guess I'll have to come back. I'll have to come back and I'll have to see kind of how the rest of the transit goes. And yeah, we'll go from there. I'll definitely come back and tell you guys all about the rest of my Saturn return and what has come up. And if these types of chats interest you, just let me know. Comment, like, subscribe, and we'll keep growing together. We'll keep learning together and evolving as we go. So thank you so much. If you listen to the whole thing, you are a trooper. And I just trust yourself. I'm gonna say it so many times, but I've needed it even for myself to say it to myself. Trust yourself. Trust yourself. That's probably the biggest theme, the biggest lesson for me is, don't lose sight of that intuition that you have. Don't lose sight that you get that little voice in your head, like you're across from that person in the room and you're just like, no. You get that little feeling of doubt, or a situation arises and you're like, so lean into that, lean into trusting yourself. And I think that sometimes we do sometimes dismiss ourselves, and we do live in a society that overly emphasizes like reason and intellectual reasoning as opposed to emotional and spiritual and intuitive reasoning. I think they have to both come together. Like if you know that you've done the work, because sometimes too that can play into it if you haven't done the work to kind of clear your subconscious and you have all of these outdated patterns and you're just moving on autopilot and coming from a place of like reacting. Yeah, sometimes that can lead you down a false path, but I also feel like even in that false path, there's something to be said about that. If you have genuine fears and genuine insecurities around, being around people that make you feel unsafe, and you have a subconscious patterning that puts you into overreactive mode every time you're in that setting, it's something worth exploring because maybe you aren't safe. Like maybe you are, but maybe you aren't. And that's something worth exploring. So never dismiss or ignore, even if you can't define it, even if you never get to a place of defining it. I think there is merit in the exploration of it. And so trust yourself and trust that God, universe, you know, the entire cosmos are conspiring in your favor, and so you're not alone in your dealings with this world, and you came here with a specific purpose and intention, and that is why certain things in your life are playing out. So trust the journey, be willing to evolve, and trust that things are happening for a specific reason, and that is that is what I'm taking away from my Saturn return so far, with my Saturn being in Pisces in my 8th house. And we'll see how the rest of it goes. So thank you for listening. I love you, lovelies. And if you want to hear more, feel free to comment, like, subscribe, and we'll continue on this journey together.